Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today's episode, we're going to continue to look at the ongoing situation around the Ukraine, in the Ukraine, and really everything about Ukraine and Russia. Well, actually, I'll try to temper that a little bit, but what I really wanted to specifically talk about today, and I'm going to skip all the news updates today, as it's pretty much the same. We're kind of hearing the same rhetoric. We continue to hear about the buildup of Russian forces and a couple of other things going on as well, to include the possible deployment of U.S. forces to Romania, which is kind of interesting. But we continue to hear about this Russian buildup on the border of Ukraine. Now, what I want to look at right now is a photograph in the general area where the mainstream media continues to show pictures of this buildup. Now, specifically, where we're at right now is the town of Yelnya. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Yelna, and it is to the south, just to the southeast of Smolensk. And this is home to the newly established 144th Mechanized Division of the Russian Federation. Now, within this general vicinity near Yelna, we are continuing to see photographs coming out of the media, and many of these photographs have been provided by a variety of satellite imaging services. So the satellites that we're looking at right now would appear to be taken around 10/31/2021. So again, not long ago, just after the spring buildup that took place. Actually, I stand. Yes, just after the spring buildup that took place, and some of these forces were supposedly left very close to the border areas of Ukraine. So again, this unit, the 144th, was recently just stood up as a new divisional unit. It is comprised mainly of other brigades, motorized rifle brigades, tank brigades within the Russian Federation that were kind of merged and then created this 144th Mechanized Division. And again, it is a heavy armored, heavy mechanized division, but we continue to see photographs like this. Now, obviously, some of the newer photographs really look a lot like this. So these forces really haven't moved at all. The only difference is there's now snow, and snow covers many of these vehicles. But I can tell you, this is not what a force that is getting ready to attack the Ukraine is going to look like. First and foremost, it's way too far away. So if we look exactly where Yelna's at and we measure the distance where this force is based, and then we draw a as a bird flies line in miles to the Ukrainian border, and again, we're talking 160 miles. So these tanks are just not going to suddenly have personnel come to various bases and barracks that are stationed near these vehicles. Individuals are just not going to jump in these vehicles and drive these vehicles 160 miles to the Ukrainian border. Not the way it works. They're going to come in with tank transports. They're going to load these vehicles on tank transports. And you're going to see this happening via satellite. And these tanks are then going to be loaded on to these tank transports, these heavy lift trucks. And it's something that's not an easy thing to do. You have to be fairly skilled as a tank driver, and more importantly, the individual that acts as your guide on to load you on to the tank transport also has to be skilled as well. Otherwise, you can Google, YouTube search it yourself and see what happens to a tank when it loads on a tank transport and does it incorrectly. It usually ends up on its side and basically does a lot of damage to the tank if it falls off. So again, all these vehicles would have to be loaded on to tank transports, with the exception of maybe like BTR 80s and those wheeled armored fighting vehicles, those wheeled APCs that the Russians use. But again, most of these vehicles, and if they're a tracked vehicle, an artillery piece, a tank-like vehicle with tracked, it is going to be loaded onto a tank transport vehicle, and it is going to be then transported 160 miles south. Well, probably not quite 160 miles south. It's probably going to get very, very close to the border, maybe 10, 20 miles, I would say, from the border, where it would then they would then deploy in a manner where it would be very, very difficult for you to see them with satellite, meaning I'll try to give an example here. It's about 10 miles. And we'll go over to here, to this area here, which is a roadway. And what would happen is these tanks would then be pulled off under trees. They would be spaced. They would be camouflaged with either camouflage tarps, and they would be hidden. Again, they wouldn't just be lining up in nice rows where everybody could see exactly what they are, where they are, who they are, how many they are. That's not the way a military operation is conducted. So when we hear about the media talking about that the Russians are doing a buildup right on the border of Ukraine, and then they're showing the satellite photographs of Yelna, and they're calling that a military buildup on the border of Ukraine, that's simply inaccurate. This is not on the border of the Ukraine. It's 160 miles north of the Ukrainian border, and this is not a unit that's getting ready to cross a phase line and engage the enemy in zone. That's not what these guys are doing. Yeah, they're deployed. It's obviously a military base, or becoming a very large military base, but it's something that's not getting ready to conduct active military operations right this minute. And in fact, I just want to see something here real quick. So okay, so 224 miles from the Latvian border. So again, quite a bit more distance, but still, this unit could actually be just as much of a threat to the Baltics as it could to the Ukraine. Now, obviously, you're looking at 160, 150 miles versus 220 mile. But again, it's not that more of a distance between the Baltics and Ukraine that we're talking about right here in terms of the Yelna units. And again, there's definitely more tanks now at Yelna that are being deployed. We don't know what unit additionally they're bringing into these areas. But again, traditionally, this has been the 144th Mechanized Division. Now, with that being said, I can tell you that, yes, there are units that are being positioned much closer to the border of Ukraine. But again, initially, it doesn't look like the scale that we're seeing with the basing of those units 160 miles to the north near Yelna. So again, there is additional deployments ongoing, but again, that Yelna photograph continues to be shown by the media, and again, they continue to say this is what is being massed on the border of the Ukraine. Now, obviously, they like using this photograph because to the untrained observer, if I tell you, look at all these tanks that are massing on the Ukrainian border, and 9 times out of 10, that low information person may not do his due diligence and look where Yelna is, look where Smolensk is, and then they also just don't understand what a tank unit looks like in terms of its pre-operational deployment. Again, this is a motor pool type environment, not getting ready to attack someone at this point. Again, that's not to say that these units can't be deployed down south, but again, it's going to take time. And again, if we start to see these units vacate and putting on tank transports and being moved south, then that would be obviously a huge, huge concern. But that's not what's happening right here, at least in Yelna. So again, just wanted to talk about that again today and kind of bring some enlightenment into the conversation. I had also heard and observed some of the Twitter feeds about the deployment of possible U.S. heavy assets to Romania, and it looked like probably a half a dozen Abrams and a few Bradley fighting vehicles, and they were being transported on tank transports in Romania. Now, the interesting thing, those tanks look to be older Abrams models. They look to be M1A1 heavy commons without the hunter killer system, nor the Crow's 50 cal mount that is on newer Abrams that we see. So what I think we're quite possibly seeing in terms of that deployment, I believe that those tanks that you're seeing, those older tanks that are being moved into Romania, in all likelihood, that is pre-positioned equipment in Europe. So again, this was probably equipment that we have pre-positioned in Europe. It's probably going to be older stuff. We probably did it a few years ago. And the reason we're using that older equipment is, let's say that hypothetically or even realistically that this unit is coming from Fort Carson. Well, what would happen is if, let's say, the unit was coming from Fort Carson, this tank unit that's based at the Heavy Brigade at Fort Carson, just south of Colorado Springs, or even Fort Hood. Let's say it's the 1st Cavalry Division, hypothetically. If you're actually going to move the tanks of these units, you would have to basically it's a significant effort. You have to take these tanks, put them on railheads, transport them down, usually to Beaumont, Texas, and they're offloaded near Port Arthur or near Beaumont, and then they're put on transport ships, or usually at a port in Texas, and then they're floated and transported to Europe. Now that's going to take a lot of time. So to save time, what they're probably doing is flying in troops from Carson or Fort Hood, and they are going to marry those forces probably in Romania with some of this pre-position stuff that was maybe in Poland or someplace else, and they're just throwing it on tank transports in Poland and driving it down to Romania, and that's how they're getting on these vehicles or moving vehicles that can be used. Otherwise, if the United States were going to deploy heavy units from Carson, going to take a long time to put those tanks on a railhead, move them to a port, float them on a ship, and then send them over to Romania. This is just much more faster, but at the same time, they're getting less advanced tanks, which would appear to be more of a political statement than an actual military statement. So again, this whole thing really has a wag the dog feel to it, quite frankly. I could be completely wrong, and Russia could invade tomorrow, and that wouldn't surprise me. But it still would not surprise me if absolutely nothing happens, and this is just political spin on both sides. Have a good day, everybody.